Today we're out on a job site, actually down at the church that I go to, and we're going to hang this barn door right here. We bought it. Still needs to be assembled, finished, and hung in one of the pastor's offices. So it's kind of a surprise for him. He's in China. Hi, my name is Bob, and I love my two-car garage. Now, I bought this online, and when I did, it said it only takes 45 minutes to put it together. We shall see.
Of course, I read the directions, and that took about 15 minutes or so, and then I was ready to jump into the assembly. I laid out a sheet of plywood to work on. Doing this on the ground or without adequate space could make this really awkward. Assembly was really pretty simple. The door was made out of natural alder, which means it has a lot of knots, which looked nice and gave it that rustic look. It was held together with long lag screws and washers, and no glue was required. The whole process took me about 2 or 3 hours.
All right, now even though this door was made in a factory and it should be perfect, you never know. So we're going to do a little measuring here to make sure we're nice and square. So if I measure from corner to corner, the measurements should be exactly the same. And this is 94 1/8. It is 94 1/4. It's 1/8 of an inch off. That's not too bad, but I think I'm going to put a clamp on it and see if we can get it perfect. I loosened up the bolts a little bit, just a little bit. I put this big long bar clamp on it. I put it on the long dimension. I'm going to tighten it up a little bit and get this thing perfect. All right, I need to mortise out for this little handle right here in the front of the door. This is going to decide which way is right and which way is left. So I checked and double checked to make sure that I was getting this thing on the right size. I'm going to use my my small trim router right here with a straight cutting bit in it, and I did this. I made a little frame. I've used this a lot of times because it's adjustable. This is going to be the guide or the template that I run my router along. And as you can see, my little template here allowed me to make a perfect little mortise. Now this is one of those scary times, one of those times where you really can't turn back real easily. I'm going to stain it. I put some different stains on the bottom here and had some people look at it, and we decided that this gray is going to look great.
I applied my stain with 2 rags. Old t-shirts work great. One smaller rag is my wiping on rag, and the other is used for wiping off. I really prefer working with oil-based stains because they take longer to dry and allow you more time to wipe off and even up the look. Of course, that means you need to let them dry overnight, so that's what I did. The next day, I spent some time touching up with an artist's brush and got rid of some of the smudges I accidentally left with some 220 sandpaper. It's a good idea to stand the door up during this process so you can see what it looks like installed. Once the stain was thoroughly dry, I used my HVLP sprayer to apply a coat of lacquer sanding sealer, and then I sanded the whole door with 320 sandpaper and finally a coat of satin lacquer. When I'm spraying, one coat means spray it horizontally once and then vertically.
I want to make sure that I get this thing in the right place. I don't want to drill holes in my nice pretty door and then find out that it's the wrong height. So what I did is I made myself a board that is the same length as the height of the door. I'm going to mount this on there first, and then I'm going to take it up to the room and make sure that it all makes sense.
According to the directions, I needed to drill the holes on center, the height of the door, plus 1 5/8 inches, plus the gap at the floor, which I made another 5/8 of an inch. I marked it and then checked it with my cheater stick. By the way, you should never assume that your floor is level. I'm measuring from the highest point on that floor. Leveling the rail is a really important process. Otherwise, the door will always want to drift one way or another. So I was really careful in the leveling process. The next step was to find the wood studs and mark it on the metal rail, which was not pre-drilled. Then back down to the shop and drilling the rail. I actually drilled progressively larger holes for accuracy. I really didn't want to miss those studs. Then back up to the room to install the rail with one final check for levelness. I used an extra long bit for my pilot hole because I didn't want to take a chance of breaking the lag screws.
Cool.
I carefully aligned the hardware on the barn door using a spacer block I cut for that very purpose. At this point, it was time to call in some help, so my friends Brad and his wife Judy came in for the barn door raising.
All right, I hope we did this right.
Well, we'll know now.
Yes, we will. My side's in.
My side is in. Oh, baby.
Woohoo! Yeah, buddy. Looky there. It doesn't move. So.
And this is the true test of your rail being level.
It doesn't move.
I guess this Padre's going to start to cry when he sees this.
I think so too. This right now is the really fun part because we get to put on all the hardware and we get to see it like up there looking cool, and it really looks good in this office, doesn't it, Brad?
It looks wonderful.
This little piece of hardware keeps your door from falling off the end, which would not be a good thing.
And then turn it around and I'm gonna roll the door up to it like that.
And this little guy is the anti-jump off the rail device.
And punch that.
Here's one more little screw. I don't know which ones you're using.
We need a pan head. It's kind of a round head.
Phillips
Yeah.
head.
There we go. All right, I am really happy with the way this barn door turned out. I think it looks great. I like the color of the stain. I like the sheen on the lacquer. I think it looks really good. Now, a lot of times when you install a barn door like this, you'll actually kind of rough it up on purpose. Hit it with sanders and chains and everything else to make it look a little rougher. But we didn't want to do that in here because the look of this study is kind of shiny, kind of nice, so we wanted to leave it that way. Want to leave you with an old ancient proverb that says, "Do you see a man skilled in his work? He will stand before kings." So whatever you do, do it well.